So now we get to a named procedure. So what's a named procedure? A named procedure is a chunk of code that's stored in the database that you can use by name to execute later. So you basically store it in the database by name. You come back and say, well, go and execute this name, and it will execute the code again without you having to read it, write it, build it, test it, and so on and so forth all over again every single time. That's the idea of naming and storing procedures. It is called, in database parlance, it's actually called a stored procedure or a database procedure. It has a name. It's stored in the database. Well, duh. And it can be executed again because you stored it. This is the basic syntax for the create procedure command in Oracle SQL or Oracle PL/SQL. Create procedure, the or replace means that there is no alter procedure command. There's not much point. So you create the procedure or you replace whatever you've got now with something that already exists in the database. You cannot say create procedure if it already exists because it will fail. You need to put or replace in there. If you put create or replace and the procedure doesn't exist, doesn't care, it still creates it. So you create the procedure, obviously required if it already exists. You have parameter definitions, which in Oracle happen to be in, out, or in, out. In other words, if you pass a parameter in, you're going to pass a value into a procedure, not expecting to get a value out from that in parameter. You have an out type of parameter. It means you can't pass something into it, but you can only pass a value out. It means you're actually pulling values out to the parameters from a procedure. Like a function, except that a function passes it out as a result, so you can actually use the function as an expression procedure. You can't. And you get a special type of parameter in PL/SQL that is both in and out, which means you can pass a value in and then you can actually interrogate the value at the end of the procedure's execution and pull a value out as a result of whatever the procedure did. Data types are more general as PL/SQL parameters, I like to think, but not necessarily. There is also an alter procedure command that simply allows you to compile the procedure and set debug and reuse settings. So there is an alter procedure command, but it's not comprehensive in terms of actually replacing the code to replace whatever's stored in the procedure. It allows you to basically test the code or pass the code that's in the procedure already to make sure that the statements are correct and proper. Because what happens in Oracle is that inside a procedure you can look at tables, and somebody could come along and drop that table. What happens to your procedure? When it runs again, it can't find the table. It just freaks out and blows up and throws an exception trap, and your application goes haywire. What happens is that the procedure actually gets invalidated if it has something like a table that's been dropped or altered in some way, or another procedure that's been altered in some way. Changing another procedure that this one calls can invalidate this procedure, and it'll have a little flag inside the database that says it's invalid, so when you try to execute it, it's going to say you can't do that. It's going to give you an error before you even go into it and start making a mess of your database. And the obvious other part of the syntax is the drop command, where you drop a procedure. Let's go and look at an example quickly of a named procedure and using the various syntax pieces of working with named procedures. This topic will be continued in the next movie.